Okay, I want to be respectful of everybody's time, so we're going to head and get going. Thank you for joining us today for another session in this series of Eclipse Lunch and Learns. We're excited that you are all here today. I know I've got some new faces joining us, so please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, who you are, which organization or Eclipse group or task force you are with. My name is Dawn Davies. I'm the Night Sky Program Manager for Hill Country Alliance and helping to run this Eclipse team and our quarterly roundtable meetings and these bi-monthly lunch and learns. And I am delighted to introduce you to today's subject matter expert. We have here Katie Raney. She's the coordinator for field interpretation at Texas State Parks, supporting interpretation and education at all 89 state parks now. We've just had one new one added. And she's been in the field of interpretation for over 15 years, working for the National Park Service and at the Bob Bullock Texas State History Museum, in addition to the state parks. She's a busy woman. And she also leads the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department's annual night sky training. And I know her originally as an amateur astronomer through the Austin Astronomical Society, and she is here today to talk to us about the very important subject of education and outreach when it comes to the eclipses. So take it away, Katie.
Amazing. Thank you, Dawn. Everyone see my screen okay? Awesome. So I'm going to talk briefly about informal education and how eclipses can be a really amazing opportunity, as many of you know, I'm sure, to interact with our folks in an informal way, in an engaging and in a memorable way. And I'm going to do this through just a quick rapid fire series of my favorite tried and true activities. I've been doing solar astronomy since 2012. I got really interested in it when we had a partial eclipse in 2012, and also the transit of Venus, which, if any of you remember that, is pretty exciting. You get to see the face of Venus silhouetted against the sun, and it's not going to happen for another, like, I don't know, 90 years or something. Like, we won't be here. And so I was just fascinated by this, and that really was what gave me the solar astronomy bug. So I've been doing solar astronomy program not just for eclipses, but for any kind of solar astronomy stuff since 2012, because I love it so much. So I would like to share with y'all some of my favorite activities. These resources are going to also be on the Hill Country Alliance Eclipse portal. I'm always here as a resource from Texas Parks and Wildlife, and then I'm also going to be around to answer any questions about state parks or anything like that. So to start out, as many of y'all might know, we have a whole lot of state parks in totality coming up in April. We have more than we had in annularity this October, and so we, everywhere from Del Rio to Texarkana, we'll be programming for visitors, welcoming people into our parks, and helping them make both emotional and intellectual connections to our solar eclipse and to our resources at our sites. I know some of you may have these parks in your communities, or maybe you're planning on being at one of these parks for the total eclipse. And you can find more information about our solar eclipse at texasstateparks.org/eclipse. We had a pretty good time at the annular eclipse across the state. We don't have all of our attendance numbers yet, but a lot of parks offered both informal and formal programming. I was out at Kickapoo Cavern, which we broke our record for day use out there for the eclipse. It was a little cloudy for us, but we had a great time with both our staff and our volunteers engaging in a lot of these activities with visitors. So here is my rapid fire 7 different activities that you can do for the solar eclipse or for any time. Number 1 are pocket sun clocks. Now, these work a lot similarly to a sundial. If you look at the diagram, you can see it's just a folded piece of paper with a piece of yarn or string connecting each side, and maybe some tape, or you can just knot the yarn. So really the only supplies that you need for this one are the paper with the template printed out and pre-cut string or yarn. I like to have kiddos color their pocket sun clocks, create them with the stringer yarn, and then I let them go outside and figure out how to use it. And the spoiler alert for all of you is that your pocket sun clock needs to face south in order for it to work. But I don't tell that to our kids and families. they've got to figure it out for themselves, and then they can slide it in into their pocket, literally, because it's just about the size of your hand. This is a really fun activity anytime you're doing something related to the sun, because our sun is more important than just eclipses, right? We rely on it for energy, for food in an indirect way, and it's a part of our lives. But I feel like this is why I like solar astronomy so much. I like having people take a closer look at something that they kind of take for granted, and pocket sun clocks and using our sun to put ourselves in that time is one really good way to do that. This comes from the Astronomy Society of the Pacific, which is a fantastic resource as well for activities. Related to that are any kind of food web activities. Again, it doesn't all have to be astronomy and science, because the sun is an integral part to where energy comes from and every single kind of food web on the planet. This is a fantastic activity. Again, also from Astronomy Society of the Pacific, and I'll share the full curriculum later. But it's called Where Does Energy Come From? It's got everything on there from cows to refrigerators to cereal to hamburgers. And you can do a really fun and interactive activity with this set of cards. It's all pre-made. All you have to do is print them, and you can even follow along with the instructions. It could also be something you do at a tabling event. Next one is not from Astronomy Society of the Pacific. This is a Katie Raney original. This is Sun Mythbusters. I also have a moon version, but this is another great activity for if you're at a tabling event or you're just trying to engage an audience. These are a series of true-false cards that spark conversation. So for example, we can play a brief round of Sun Mythbusters right now. Why don't you tell me in the chat, do you think it's true or false that light from the sun reaches Earth in about 8 minutes? What do we think? Is that true, or is that a sun myth? Got a false, got a true. Ooh, we're split, huh? So this one is true. The sunlight from the sun does take about 8 minutes to reach Earth. What about this one? And since we're on the solar eclipse lunch and learn, I expect we all get it correct. A solar eclipse occurs when the Earth is between the sun and the moon. Is that true, or is that a sun myth? Let's hear it in the chat. Those of you that are more astronomically inclined might recognize the definition here as being for a lunar eclipse, not a solar eclipse. So those of you that said false, you hit it right on the head. A lunar eclipse occurs when the Earth is between the sun and the moon. So we use these cards a fair amount in parks because it's just, like I said, a really great way to spark conversation about this ever-present thing in the sky, and share some interesting facts along the way. Another thing we do with the sun is different kinds of scale activities. So this is one of the ones we did out at Kickapoo last weekend. We've got a scale model of the Earth and the moon on a yardstick, and you can also kind of line it up with the sun there. And you can do this with almost any type of object. As long as you create something and you put in the size online, you can actually figure out, like, if your Earth is 2 inches, how big should your sun be, for example. That's actually what I did for this next scale activity, which is where you can make a sun and an Earth to scale. The sun here is 8 inches in diameter. So I put that in the online calculator, which you can find just by Googling, and figured out how big my Earth should be. And I will say I unabashedly stole this from NASA, but because it's NASA, it's public domain, and I gave them credit on the back. But they have a version of this that's on cardstock, and I don't have that. So I only had one. We made it on here to share it. So this is also available on the HCA website. And again, this is another eye-catching thing, because everybody likes to talk about themselves. And in that case, that means Earth. Comparing us to the sun is always a really impactful moment. All right, so we probably saw a lot of pinhole viewers in October, and we'll probably see many more in April. The best ones I saw were like this out of cereal. boxes. But I also want to point out that if you have access to a 3D printer, you can print custom pinhole viewers from the NASA website. So this is the ones that we printed these at Texas Parks and Wildlife. We have a 3D printer in our exhibit shop, and we printed, I want to say, about 40 or 50 of these to go across the state for the annular eclipse, and we'll probably end up doing more, or maybe even design our own like Texas shaped one for the total eclipse. And these are, again, we're not giving these away. We're just using them for pinhole viewing on site, but they're a little bit more memorable and fun and a great photo op as well. Plus it's through NASA. And so, you know, it can be it's well researched and official. We've also done this activity to make solar eclipse viewing a little safer on small eyeballs. You know, we've got our glasses that we use, but sometimes that can be almost like too much of a temptation for little kids to look up and look around outside of their glasses. So you can make solar eclipse masks from everything from paper plates to patterns like this. In the image you see, they're actually using film in the glasses, but the way that we did it at Kickapoo last week or 2 weeks ago was we used paper plates that we attached to the glasses, and we saw some fantastic artwork. And so that way it's a little bit more coverage for our kiddos out there and feel a little bit safer for looking at the sun. My last activity idea is anything you can do with citizen or community science. If you have a small group, if you're outside of totality, or if you really want to do something focused with citizen science, I would recommend the Globe Observer app. This is an app through NASA where you take cloud and temperature measurements throughout the time of the eclipse. And they use that data to see how the eclipse and the heat from the sun and the light from the sun, how that changes based on where you are with your cloud coverage. So even if it's cloudy, you can actually still do this activity, and it's extremely valuable data. It does take a little time. You can't just say, oh, it's 72 degrees and there's a few clouds. You have to identify the types of clouds. You have to get into it a little bit more with what types and how high level they are. But like I said, if you have a small group, or if you would like to sit around with folks and take measurements every 10 minutes for an hour or so, it could be a really valuable experience. So you also, if you're familiar with the app iNaturalist, in 2017, they did a project, which is how things are categorized in the iNaturalist, for organism movement during the eclipse. So you had to record what an animal was doing before, at totality, and then after. And of course, you don't always see animals the whole time that you're out there. So there's a lot of people observing chickens or insects, but all that is really interesting. And iNaturalist was pretty nascent in 2017. So I think that we'll see a lot more in 2024. And I'm really excited to maybe do that one as well. All right, I'm also going to share my most favorite curriculum for any kind of solar science. It is, again, from Astronomy Society of the Pacific and NASA JPL. It's called Our Magnetic Sun. Dawn has the link, I think. And this is my most favorite curriculum. I've used these activities for literally over 10 years and can't recommend it enough. There's so much out there in terms of activities and curriculums and like all the things that you can do for eclipses. I know it can get super overwhelming. This one has a great basis in science and gives you that awesome background, but then also has some really good activities as well, just about how why the sun is important, how it acts as a giant magnet, and how it affects our life. So good for the eclipse, but also good for after the eclipse. You can also visit, like I mentioned earlier, texasstateparks.org/eclipse. I have not updated it yet from 2 weeks ago. Our web person is on vacation and we all need a little bit of a breather after the annular, but I'll probably update it next week. And those are my rapid fire lunchtime activities. I'm here for questions, comments, anything about informal solar education or Texas State Parks in general.
Those are all great activities. I love particularly how, a lot of them aren't necessarily just about eclipses, because it's really an important factor to consider that, our sun is not just here for our display during eclipse periods, that it has a lot of, it contributes a lot to our well-being and our existence. So,
Yeah,
feel
I'm
free
pretty happy
to,
we have a sun.
yeah, yeah, I
That
think
big
we
ball
all
of gas
should
in the
be.
sky, super grateful.
Big fan, except for when it's a little too hot.
Yeah, fair.
All right, Lisa's asking, where did, let's see, oops, I disappeared. Uh,
Oh,
Oh,
where are
where
the
are these
resources
resources available? So
available?
we will be linking these on the Hill Country Eclipse portal, hopefully in the next few hours after this meeting, and we'll make sure that gets out to everybody. And then the link to our magnetic sun is there in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions or go ahead and put them in the chat if you don't have speaking capabilities. So I know a lot of folks equate education and outreach, especially with youth. What has been your experience in these activities and just general education and outreach with adults?
So I find that adults also have this innate sense of curiosity and excitement about something like the sun that they really haven't been invited to look at or really experience. And so, I don't see adults sitting there coloring pocket sun clocks all the time. They could if they wanted to. But for things like food web activities, for any kind of our viewing, I play moon or sun mythbusters or moon mythbusters. I do that too, with adults and kids equally, because a lot of times adults want to like show you what they know, or learn a little bit more, and so it can be like an ego thing, like, oh yeah, I know that that's a lunar eclipse and not a solar eclipse, or it can be a curiosity thing. I am not one of those educators who thinks that if the kids are having fun, the adults are having fun and we only need to focus on the kiddos. Very much of a family and an everybody type of educator, and I approach all of my activities and things like that they're appropriate for everybody, for all age groups, and we should involve adults as much as we involve the kids.
Outstanding,
I'm
outstanding.
also working on some art activities. We've gotten some ideas over the past few weeks that we didn't have enough time to go into fruition for the annular eclipse. But I also say with art activities specifically, I always invite adults to participate. And sometimes they'll even do it longer than the kids. Now, making an eclipse mask might not be an adult centric thing, but I have this idea for like a paint activity where we paint the corona of the sun and use like a straw to blow the paint and sort of mimic what our sun looks like, and then we do the moon over it. I'm not sure, it's still kind of going in my brain. That's the kind of thing that I would love and would aim toward both kids and adults.
I love that idea. Very interactive, and you just room for so much interpretation. So 33 state parks on the path of totality. That is impressive. Are you familiar with whether, is each park planning on having, an interpreter there for eclipse specific conversations and activities? Um,
So most of our parks will have programming with their interpreter or with a volunteer group, or with a standalone volunteer like Dawn. I know you did that
mhm.
at Government Canyon during the annular eclipse. Um, so we're not planning quite yet, and we're not planning any like big giant events,
Mhm.
because we have limited space in our state parks. A lot of you probably know that, and we also want to maintain the experience for people that are coming to a state park. So we don't need to turn our state parks into a county fairgrounds for the day. Like, those are two different kinds of places and activities. But most of the parks that the eclipses are going to have full-time interpreters. We'll be doing a fair amount of planning to get folks up to speed for the eclipse, even more so than we already have been doing. I'm trying to pull up my map here. And those that don't have full-time interpreters, who don't have somebody who is going to do programming there, will probably end up with somebody like me. And so you can expect like informal and engaging programming on the day of the eclipse. So there's not going to be, because one thing my interpreters told me last year is they're worried about being so busy during the eclipse that they miss it. And I
Yeah.
was like, that's the saddest thing. Like, we are not going to make you like sit there and do a 2 hour long program where you're just talking. We want you to also experience this amazing thing, like, obviously.
Mhm.
So, we'll think of it as like we'll have drop-in activities and informal things like that. But maybe the day before or the day after might be an opportunity for an amphitheater program or something where you're with that interpreter or that volunteer a little bit longer. Maybe a star party, for example. But
Mhm.
during the day of the actual eclipse, you can expect informal drop-in style programming at parks.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that was most startling to a lot of people that I met at Government Canyon is just how much time there actually is. Yes, during, annularity, we are focused on that. During totality, we'll be focused on that. But there's several hours worth of time on either side to really do a lot of great interactive outreach and education to folks. So
Absolutely.
there's definitely a lot of room for that. Any other questions from folks on the chat? I don't want to make this be such a one-sided conversation over here. Feel free to ask questions with Katie on her activities or projects, or if you have any other conversations or questions regarding education and outreach, please don't be shy. Speak up. This tends to be a very quiet lunchtime crew, I've noticed in these past lunch and learns, and that's perfectly fine, but don't feel shy here. Otherwise, we'll just keep talking amongst
Yeah, that's
ourselves.
fine. Yeah, we'll just chat. Yeah.
So is
Yeah.
the Globe Observer app, are they doing anything specific related to the eclipse, or is it just we're trying to get folks engaged in, weather,
Yeah. So it's a
data?
specific eclipse project. I was looking at my phone. I actually had already deleted it from the annular eclipse, but it's a specific eclipse project. So normally that project does landform or cloud observations. But for the eclipse, they'll have a specific project that's live. And we did a couple rounds of it at Kickapoo, but I didn't have, since I was also trying to run the program, I didn't have the time to sit there and like identify every single cloud type. But if that was your
Mhm.
station, or if that was, again, you had a smaller group, it would work out really well. And it was very easy to use. It kind of walks you through it. You don't have to know like cloud types or anything like that.
Mhm. I'm curious, you said that you broke the record for day use. Having been out at Kickapoo before, I know that it is a very small, very intimate park. So roughly how many folks did you have?
Around 40. It was a small
Wow,
crowd. Yeah. And I
that's awesome.
personally am used to doing programming for many more people than that, as you know. And so it was a pretty chill day for me. I liked it. And like I said, I'm offers still open for other state parks for me to come out in in April. I've got at least two contenders right now. One of them's Government Canyon because you won't go back there because you're going somewhere else.
They did try. They did try,
But
but
they
my
loved what you did so much that they were like, Katie, is there anybody else in state parks who can bring solar telescopes and do stuff? And I'm like, oh yeah, maybe me. But also like we have lots of interpreters across the state with different kinds of equipment,
Mhm.
with white light filters, and so we can definitely make that work.
Very cool. Well, we definitely had a good time, but yeah, it is something that, we've tried to especially address in the past few sessions and in the roundtable meeting, that all of us pretty much on the Hill Country Clips team are engaged in some form of planning or preparation. But yes, take time out to experience the eclipse for yourself. I don't think anybody's going to balk if you pause for that potentially 4.5 minutes of totality to experience that. Everyone needs this opportunity because this is all our eclipse and not just for the guests that are coming into town and the tourists and the people that live here. It's for those that have been diligently spending potentially years, like you, Katie, preparing for this for all of, a few minutes and overall a few hours.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, any other, come on, comments from you guys? Maybe some information. Where were you in October? Were you for the annular? What kind of, events as far as activities did you experience, if any? I know for us, we
Who's
did
going to
have
be at a state park in April, maybe? Or what activities do you like to do with folks that are informal around solar science and solar viewing?
Yeah, if we weren't having our event where we are, I would definitely be at a state park because that is definitely my preference to experience this because all of our state parks are just amazing and have so much to offer. So it'll be interesting to get a sense of what the park attendance numbers are like after the fact. I'm sure that you guys, once you've recovered, will be pulling a lot of data and
Mhm.
information.
Well, in our preliminary data for October, leading up to it, was our parks were going to have a very busy fall weekend. And we
Mhm.
compare it to Labor Day in a lot of our sites because that's a very popular time to visit parks. And some of them were higher, some regions were lower than Labor Day. Kind of depends also on the drought and who had low water during Labor Day. And then you don't want to take that into consideration. So we have some pretty interesting tools, and we'll probably be able to do more forecasting for that in April as well.
That's outstanding. Let's see. Oh, Lisa said we had a wonderful event. We were at the library and had several local science clubs come in and bring educational activities. Patrons enjoyed the event, despite the fact we did not have a great view of the annular. There was definitely some cloud cover. We definitely had cloud cover until about halfway through first to second contact. Um, I know it. I had an electric EV scope that had some difficulty discerning the sun from all the other brightness. But
Mhm.
libraries definitely a tremendous resource and a great opportunity for doing any kind of outreach activities. Not only just a wonderful forum for it, but librarians are typically always clamoring for folks to come and do eclipse related activities and outreach. So if you're looking to tap into, any community, any group, definitely there. Let's see. Debbie's asking, has the city of Austin reached out for information or activities for the eclipse? Um, I know that the Parks and Recreation and the Science and Nature Museum are working on those here in the city of Austin. Terry, I think you have your hand raised.
Hey, Don. I joined late, sorry, but Katie may have already gone on over this, but I was wondering how the state park, are they sticking to their normal reservation period here? And like it's coming up 5 months to the event. So basically, people can start making reservations sometime in early November.
Yes, correct. It'll be 5 months. The reservation window opens at 8 a.m. each morning. And then
Okay.
that's for campsites. And then for any day use passes, it'll be 30 days ahead again, reloading at 8 a.m. Except for Enchanted Rock, which you'll need to call to make reservations for through our central reservation line, which is 512-389-8900.
So that was in Enchanted Rock is different how?
You have to call to make reservations. You can't do them online for day use or camping.
Or camping. Okay. But it's still the same timeline for reserving campsites there?
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
So do you expect anybody, say at Enchanted Rock, that really wants to be there? And you can reserve a campsite for 2 weeks, can't you?
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
think there's anybody that really wants to be there is going to reserve a campsite for 2 weeks so they can be sure?
yeah,
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
possible.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That
Yeah, I
would
there's
be
mean,
definitely
interesting.
a thing
invariably
that
somebody
people
could
will
be looking to
do.
make a reservation in the next day or two for
Yeah.
that.
Okay. All right. Well, the time is upon us. Okay.
Yeah.
And I know that for group sites, those open up a year in advance. Is that correct? So a lot of
11
those,
months.
what's that?
11 months.
11
Yeah.
months? Yeah. So a lot of those are already booked up. So if you're looking to have a group, if you're looking to make a reservation, definitely keep your timer set. I personally, I think I've been saying for quite a while that I fully expect there to be an overload or potentially a crash of the reservation system, because I know that there are a lot. Again, 33
Yeah.
state parks, a
And we're
lot to go
hoping
around.
that there won't be a crash just because the infrastructure that supports all of our reservation system and servers, as you know, nationwide, are the
Mhm.
company that runs our reservations. If you've been to our website, you've probably noticed it looks very similar to a lot of other states and national park things. So we hope that the capacity there will exist and there won't be a crash 5 months out at 8
Mhm.
a.m.
Yeah,
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed, definitely.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and if you don't want to make your campsite reservation, you can volunteer with the park and establish that relationship before the eclipse. You know, our parks don't necessarily want to say, oh, hey, yeah, we'll just have a random volunteer that we've never met come out and volunteer for the eclipse, but someone who's maybe done some programs or been out as part of an astronomy society, and then you'd like to volunteer at a specific park and camp in the volunteer campground, that sort of thing is totally reasonable if you have that pre-existing relationship with a park. So that's another option as well.
That's a really great bit of information to have, especially because I know a lot of folks on our Eclipse team, have been learning a lot about eclipses and probably have some very helpful information and skills to share. So thanks for putting that out there. Any other questions or comments, thoughts, anecdotes about education, outreach, eclipses? Off topic too. Those are welcome as well. As usual, our lunch and learns typically last about this amount of time, but I will always stay on the call until 1 o'clock for any other conversations or questions that have emerged. Definitely want to take an opportunity to thank you, Katie, for your time and your tremendously wonderful resources. And of course, your educational background knows no bounds, and we know that you will be well situated at any park that has you. And heaven forbid you let us know where that is. I'm sure we'll have a lot of folks that'll want to flock there as well to take part. But thank you so much for your input and expertise on this
Of
call.
course. Thank you for having me, Dawn. And y'all welcome to email me about anything and anything Texas State Parks or Park Eclipse related.
Wonderful.
Appreciate it.